Well, it's week 5. Welcome to Ratio Christi. Well, tonight we are continuing in our Who is Jesus series. Before we get to that, a couple announcements, things you're probably familiar with, but if not, you'll hear them now. We have food over there that you can help yourselves to, where it says foods and stuff in a really intelligent signage over there, consistent with our group. Yeah, so get some of the foods from the foods and stuff table. Anyway, if you want to keep up with what we're doing, if you aren't already, we have an email list, of course. I mentioned that many times, but it tells you where we're going to meet at, tells you where we're going to eat at beforehand. Tonight we were at Blaze Pizza, which is up there kind of by Chipotle. So if you want to know where we're going to eat next week, check the email when it comes out on Monday. We're also post that information on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so follow us there if you haven't already. And J. Warner Wallace himself liked our post on Twitter.
We're so famous.
So on the argument from authority, you should therefore also follow us and like us on Twitter too. So anyway, invite your friends if you know anybody who's interested in apologetics at your church, at UNL. Tell them about what we're doing, and we got cards back there that have all of our events on them. In a couple weeks, we have coming up our next Ratio Christi monthly event on campus in Brace Hall called Does God Exist?, where we summarize what we did last semester. So if you weren't there for that, or have any friends who'd like to hear what the evidence is for God's existence, that will be taking place October 14th, Brace Hall on UNL's campus. One thing new tonight, Crew and Ratio Christi are going to partner together and do an evangelistic outreach on UNL's campus. That will happen on October 3rd, so that's a Thursday. It's a week from tomorrow, 12, so noon to about 2 o'clock, I think. So some of us will join Crew, and then they will go out and evangelize on UNL's campus. So come participate in that. There's kind of two aspects to that. You can go with Crew and do kind of the walking around evangelism part of it, or you can help us. We'll have a table set up where people can ask hard questions. We'll be out on the Union Plaza that day, that Thursday, so come join us for that, and we'll be good there. Tabling regularly is on Wednesdays, I mentioned that, 11 to 1 in the City Campus Union, so if you want to also join us for that, come join us for that. We have conversations with people walking by in the Union about who Ratio Christi is, apologetics, worldview, philosophy, all that good stuff. So I guess without further ado, we'll get to our speaker tonight, who is not Adam. Surprise if you didn't know that. But it is Wesley, who is not a Calvinist, as his name suggests. So I'll hand it over to Wesley.
Thank you.
You want that microphone?
Thank you.
You don't want that microphone?
I don't want that microphone. No. I want my own microphone. Howdy, everybody. Let's talk about Scooby-Doo. So those of us who grew up watching Scooby-Doo know the premise. We got these young rascals that travel around in a mystery machine and solve mysteries from whatever town or carnival they're a part of. They come by, they get frightened by some ghoul or ghost or something, but each and every single time they had something, they'd catch the ghost and they'd unmask him. And that happens so often and so much that we as the audience would kind of expect it all to happen. And we kind of all knew what was happening and what was going to happen. And oh no, let's hear that song again. And oh, I hope they get their Scooby snacks. But something different happened. So that happened, and even the characters got wind of that. But something was different about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. When Scooby-Doo and the gang went to Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, it turned out the zombies turned out to be real. But after years of unmasking people in costumes, Fred would not budge. Fred came and had all these past experiences of, oh, it's always somebody. Oh, it's always somebody. I'm sure it's this. Oh, these things have happened before, and it's always turned out to be whoever. But more and more evidence came in, and Fred's excuses, Fred's explanations got more and more wild of like, oh, whatever, it's just a mask. They're just guys in masks. We've been levitated before. So when zombies come out of the ground, Daphne decides to stuns one of them and tries to put Fred's mask theory to the test. She didn't do very well, so Fred came over and pulled his head off. And then the zombie reattached his own head, and then Fred goes, oh, must be animatronics. Animatronics, of course it must be. Now, that's a fun story. And Scooby-Doo's a cartoon, and zombies aren't real. Because we know where the zombie genre came from, and we know why they don't exist, and there's no evidence for them. But the point is, if you had the type of evidence that Fred had, you may want to reconsider your position. So Daphne, after Fred gives his animatronic theory, she yells at him and she says, Fred, you're not a skeptic, you're in denial. Moved from the skeptic category to the in denial category. Why is that? Well, because evidence after evidence was piling up, and instead of him just being open to the evidence and skeptical of claims and trying to weigh what was going on, he just kept being in denial. Now this feeds right into a quote by Blaise Pascal that says, people almost invariably arrive at their conclusions not on the basis of proof, but on what they find attractive. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And we're going to ask, are you reasonable? You're going to have to ask yourself if you are reasonable. So I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go. I'm going to give you the map of what we're going to do, and then we're going to walk through it. Okay? Good news. First, we're going to talk about counseling theories, cognitive behavior theory, and reality therapy, my two favorite ones. We're going to talk about mindset, fixed and growth. We're going to go on to something cool called the skeptometer, and then we're going to talk about jury selection. So those things all fit together, don't they? All right, let's jump into it. So counseling theories. I took a few classes in counseling and learned a few of these theories, and I got really excited about a few of them. The first one's called cognitive behavior therapy. So the point behind cognitive behavior therapy is that they want the client to respond more cognitively, to think more intuitively, rather than react emotionally and quickly. So people come to counselors to get help with the way that their life is going, because it's not going well, because they keep running into situations where they're reacting emotionally. And the counselor, if they use cognitive behavior therapy, help them see inaccurate ways of thinking and help them kind of pull out of their emotional reaction and think more cognitively. The next one is called reality therapy, and I thought this one was the coolest. So the point about reality therapy is to show people that they have choices in their actions, that they are able to make choices based on stimuli on the outside. They're not a slave to their environment. They can actually make choices to better their world. My example that I think of when I talk about reality therapy is if you had a friend that came to you and said, nobody likes me and everybody hates me and nobody wants to be my friend and everybody just avoids talking to me. And no one wants to talk, no one wants to be my friend. And they come up to you and express these concerns. Now what the counselor would do, or you would do to your friend, is you'd show them that, in fact, the world around them is not that way. They have people they can turn to. They have people that are genuinely interested in being their friend or whatever. So they have a view of reality that's incorrect. So in reality therapy, you show them the actual view of reality and point out to them that their view of reality is incoherent or just not in line with what's actually happening. So those are the two. Now we're going to jump right to our table discussion really quick, because this is our first section. So we're going to go to our table discussion and talk about these two things. One, in cognitive behavior therapy, when you argue with someone, why is it better to respond cognitively rather than emotionally? And if you get done with that question, when your friend is down in the dumps and saying things like everyone hates me, are those things really ever true? So talk about these two different theories for a minute or two, and I'll bring you back. 3 seconds. All right. Good stuff. So if you haven't, if you have some questions about what we were talking about there, write them down and fire them at me at the Q&A at the end. Because those are some fun things to think about. All right, this next section, I have a quiz for you. So 3, that one goes back there, and this one goes to your table. Okay? All right, quiz for you. Put an X next to what you believe. I will time you, so try to get it done quickly. And then we will talk about the results here in a moment. Quiz for you. Oh no, I didn't give one to Matt. I'm sorry. Give one to our cameraman. Oh man, I'm terrible. Take more. All right. For those of you online with us, the 4 categories. Write down the 4 categories of strongly agree, disagree, and strongly disagree, and then keep track of the numbers. And Matt, I may need you to cycle through these for those online. So you may just have to finish that out later, or actually just maybe they can pause it. Yeah, just go through it and wait like 10 seconds, and then they'll pause it. Pause it if you're online. You'll be fine. If I were to say 20 seconds left, would that make you scared?
Only for actually getting graded.
No. Nope. No graded. Well, I don't have a number for that one. Timer went off. All right. If you didn't get done, finish up. Here's your scoring. Put the number in the same box that you put an X in. It's always either 0, 1, 2, 3 or 3, 2, 1, 0. So you can orient yourself that way. And if someone has the number, if you miss one, somebody start from the bottom or something, so that if you miss one, somebody else can tell you what the order of that is in. So this is just 1 through 10. You guys get 1 through 10? Oh, that's a good idea. Take a picture. Good call. Did you get 1 through 10? Anybody else still writing? Freaking out? All right. 10. This is 11 through 20. When you are finished, tally up your numbers to get one number. Answer them all, add them all together, and you'll get a number from between 0 and 60. This is going so well. You guys rock at this.
Are you proud of us?
This is the best. This is exactly how I saw it going. Nice job. Or if you're weird, you can add up all the columns and then add the columns together. Did it? That's what you did. That's great. I didn't mean to call you weird. I'm sorry. Did you do 2.5 or 1.5 for those? That's hilarious. Put it down the middle. There's no neutral. Can't be neutral.
Too late.
All right. So, you have a number, right? Well, when you get that number, this is the results. Here's my, what's it called? Qualifier. I disagree with some of these questions, the way they're numbered. At least one of them I strongly disagree with. But that's different. That's a different fight, and we can fight about that later. But here is the point. So if you have a number between 45 and 60, you have a strong growth mindset. If you have 34 through 44, you have a growth mindset with some fixed ideas. 21 to 33 is fixed mindset with some growth ideas. And 0 to 20, you have a strong fixed mindset. Okay? 0 to 20, 21 through 33, and 34 through 44. 45 through 60. Now, I did all this so that you could find something out about yourself and be like, hey, neat, I'm one of those things. So now I'm going to tell you about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. When I was a teacher for 5 years. I taught music. It was a lot of fun. We would have these big teacher meetings where all the teachers would come together and we'd bring in some outside speaker, or like one of our people would come and give a talk on something like this, and they would shove. I should have used the word nay. They would push, nay, shove. There we go. That sounds much better. The concept of getting into students the idea of a growth mindset. They would put these ideas down because growth mindset is always like just so much better or whatever. They were like, okay, if you have a growth mindset, you're going to be successful. Let me tell you the differences here. So a fixed mindset is characterized by believing you have fixed traits. You believe that talent alone is for success, and effort is now required. For a growth mindset, you're usually characterized by learning. You can take criticism and learn from it. Effort has an effect on your success, or like you put in extra time in order to achieve well. Now, this isn't, the quiz was what the quiz is, and it has flaws, but this is the point. Nebraska, UNL, here. You've seen people walk around with a shirt that says, "In our grit, our glory." Well, the word grit is growth mindset. There's been like TED Talks on grit, and like if you have grit, that is what leads to success. If you buckle down and keep having determination to go and go, that's like what that is. So that's why they're constantly telling students, hey, make sure that you are accepting of the criticism that we give you, or hey, make sure that, even though things come easy to you sometimes, you don't have to plateau and then get frustrated when things don't go well after you work at that, and then, it's not coming to me easy anymore, so I'm just going to give up. No, if it comes to you easy, you work hard at it to get better. So this is what they push. This is what teachers, high school students, middle school students, and elementary students, what I would teach my students to think in these terms, because that's what success is measured by, or that's how they see how successful people are, is because they have a growth mindset. So, at your table, try not to discuss how terrible the questions were. I know I'm not going to be able to stop that, but talk about what type you are. Talk about what type of mindset you have, and consider this chart that talks about, what's it say? Challenges, obstacles, effort, criticism, and success of others, and how each mindset views these things. And if you find yourself not liking the category you're in, do some introspection. Ask yourself if you're actually that way. Now, I know I just blasted fixed mindset, and if you found yourself in fixed mindset, sorry, but that's why I did that. That's why I did the quiz. Good stuff. But think about it. Think through yourself, introspect, and talk about why these things are different. 2 minutes. Ready, go. All right. What fun. Thinking through stuff, getting frustrated. Good stuff. Okay. So, let's recap. So, we first talked about counseling theories, and we discussed cognitive behavior therapy, where it's better, the counselors want their clients to think cognitively rather than react emotionally. So thinking cognitively, thinking through things, is a better idea. We talked about reality therapy, where if somebody comes in with a skewed version of reality, the counselor, if they use reality therapy, gets them on track of what's truly going on. We talked about mindset and how if people have a fixed mindset, they usually don't see themselves being able to grow and learning, being able to take criticism and learn from what comes at them is a mark of someone with a growth mindset. Where we're headed is we're going to talk about the skeptometer, and we're going to talk about jury selection. Skeptometer, I have to say, is my favorite, and also sometimes very snarky. So be ready for some snark. And my purpose is with this next section is to engage in some of this material. So if you find yourself wanting to be offended, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to engage in it in a scholarly and also entertaining way. So search for the point that I'm trying to make, and interact with that instead of the way that the snark comes through. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. You guys will love it. So this is the skeptometer. Woo! It wheels around. So we all have what we'll call a skeptometer. And the way this works is, I actually made one because I was such a fan. How beautiful. So we have a skeptometer in our brains, and skeptometers are applied to ideas that come at us. And if we like an idea, we can lower our level of skepticism to like a 3 or 4, or if we really like it, we can kind of just be open to it and wanting to hear about it, and open to the proof and being like, that proves it, But we can also go really, really low so that any amount of evidence for any idea that we put this on is proof enough. And we say, proof enough, that proves it. Take that, other side, because of this argument. Ha-ha! And that's a little unreasonable, I'd say. That's that extreme. We can also raise our level of skepticism if we don't like an idea to something reasonable, maybe a 8 or a 9 or something, or a 7, somewhere around here. They'll be like, okay, well, I don't really like that idea, so I'm going to be kind of reserved about it. Or we can raise it so high that no amount of evidence is going to convince us. So that's the idea behind the skeptometer that we all have, that we apply to ideas such as God's existence, such as Bigfoot, such as miracles. Okay? So these ideas come at us, and we can be more or less skeptical of them. We can be less skeptical in that, somebody who comes and says, hey, there's a miracle over there. And you say, that's amazing! And then you don't ask for any proof. And you don't have, and then you go tell everyone that there's a miracle right there. Or you can be highly skeptical and, pounds and pounds of evidence won't convince you. So we're going to talk, we're going to bring this back up, but first we're going to go into a talk about Michael Shermer. Michael Shermer is a popular atheist who works at, the school is called Chapman University. And he teaches Skepticism 101. He's got a Skeptic magazine. He's the founder and publisher of that. So he's a popular atheist that is in the public eye and has ideas and is an influencer in that realm. So we're going to talk about Shermer, Dr. Michael Shermer, and his last law. And then we're going to talk about an implication of his last law that he himself brings up, and then a complaint that he has, and we're going to examine them. So those 3 things. So let's get into his last law. Shermer's last law is that any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial intelligence is indistinguishable from God. So you have to wrestle with that. That's what he says. Michael Shermer claims that if there were powerful aliens that came down and that actually got here and did something, they'd be able to do amazing things. So if we encountered something that we couldn't explain, how do you know it wasn't just a powerful alien? Is his last law. That's the thing he leans back on pretty much at the end. I wouldn't say it at the end of his rope, but that's the end of his final argument. So how would you know? That's his implication. How would you know? This is a question for you. How would you know you encountered God? That it wasn't just some super advanced ET able to do stuff like this. Listen. But then Michael Shermer puts these things in place, and then he complains. He gives a complaint to the theists. This was in a debate he had, he gives a complaint that says, why does God seem to just heal stuff that might have happened anyway? Why is it, people pray for stuff and people are resilient. Tumors can go into remission and heart surgeries can go well. I mean, those things happen. You don't need to really pray for them. Food nourishes bodies. People travel safely. These are things Michael Shermer's saying. And then he asks a question about God and chides God about why he never heals. Why doesn't God heal amputees? Why do humans never grow limbs? Why does God hate amputees? Does he hate them? Maybe he works in mysterious ways. Or because there is no God. This is all Michael Shermer's argument. But laid out like this, you gotta look at it and see what's going on. So I have a question for Michael Shermer that he was actually asked. What would count as evidence for God's existence? If God did exist, would you want to know it? Are you actually wanting to know if God exists? And if you did, wouldn't you need a methodology in order to see if he existed or find that out? So for Michael Shermer, he answered the question of what would count as evidence for God's existence as something that wouldn't happen otherwise. And I have an example of Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z, growing an arm back, as a humorous example. But something that wouldn't happen otherwise. That's his answer to Shermer, what would count as evidence for God's existence. But recall Shermer's last law, that any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial is indistinguishable from God. So how come, if something that wouldn't happen otherwise is what you would count as evidence for God's existence, couldn't you just say aliens did it? I mean, God could even heal every amputee in the world. And, powerful aliens could do that, right? So this is the quandary he puts himself in by setting that up as his last law. Now I'm going to show you a little 1.5-minute video of something extremely snarky and quite humorous. But remember, engage with the ideas. It's 1.5 minutes. Not very long.
This is why when atheists send me messages saying, prove to me that God exists, I almost never give them an argument for God's existence. Instead, I reply, I'd be happy to prove to you that God exists, but I don't want to send proof to someone who doesn't exist. So before I prove to you that God exists, prove to me that you exist. Then I dial my skeptometer up to 10, just like the atheist was about to do when he demanded proof for God's existence. So I get another message from the atheist saying, I obviously exist since I'm sending you these messages. But I'm a skeptic, so I ask, well, how do I know that someone's pet monkey isn't just slapping a keyboard? If something as sophisticated as DNA can form by chance, surely a monkey could type your messages by chance, especially with all of the misspelled words. Or maybe someone created an atheist message generator, which mindlessly sends out these messages and is even programmed with responses, all to waste the time of Christians. So we go back and forth, and eventually the atheist says, look, I'll buy a plane ticket and come see you. To which I reply, how would that be any evidence at all? Even if you came to see me, how would I know that I'm not dreaming? How would I know that I'm not in the Matrix? How would I know that I'm not a brain in a vat that's being controlled by some mad scientist? How would I know that powerful aliens aren't just tricking me into believing that you came to see me? And so we never actually get to a discussion of evidence for God's existence, because when I use the atheist's methodology against him, he can't even prove his own existence.
So that illustrates the very well the highly skeptical view of things is unreasonable, right? Because if you have a highly skeptical view of stuff, the bar is set so ridiculously high for stuff that you just don't like. So Christians, if there's evidence out there that God exists, or that God doesn't exist, and you just don't look at it, and you don't want to see it, and you don't want to engage with it, you might be a little too skeptical. Similarly, atheists, if there's evidence out there that God exists, and you don't want to see it, you don't want to engage with it, or there's evidence of things, and you're not engaging, you might be a little too skeptical. So that's why it illustrates humorously that we all need to lower our bar of what counts as evidence, because how would we know if we're not dreaming? All these things. There's a fun example from the Bible found in Luke 11 where Jesus was casting out a demon, and the people that saw him explained it away and said he casts out demons by Beelzebub. And that would explain what happened. So this is just an example of this same thing happening, found in the Bible, found in Luke 11. People explaining away evidence. So if Jesus was on earth, people would explain away his miracles by illusion or deception, or, if all else fails, powerful aliens. But I hear an objection in my head, and I hear an objection from people sometimes, that if God performed a miracle, we believe it. If he did a miracle in front of me, if God healed an amputee, let's say that, we'd convert right now. And here comes more snarkiness. Are you sure? Are you sure that that's what would happen? If that actually happened in front of you, you wouldn't dream of explaining away that evidence? You wouldn't dream of coming up with some other explanation that it happened? You need to see. And prominent atheists have admitted this. Richard Dawkins admitted this thing. He was asked, what would count as evidence, and he said, I always gave lip service to, I'm paraphrasing because I'm remembering his quote, I always gave lip service to the fact that, the second coming of Jesus, or if there was a message in the sky that said, I am God, believe in me, or I heard it audibly, I am God. But then he admits, that's not even, I probably wouldn't even convert if that happened. And then the questioner asks, what would count? And he goes, I'm starting to think nothing would. So he's being consistent in that he's saying, nope, nothing's gonna convince me. And I would argue that that's not a very reasonable position. Here's a 30-second video or so of David Wood again, summing up what we talked about right here.
My atheist friends, by constantly demanding evidence while proving over and over again that evidence is completely meaningless to you and that your methodology is designed to help you avoid conclusions that you don't like, you're not showing us that there's no evidence for God's existence. All you're showing us is that you are in denial. And you might have gotten away with it too, if it wasn't for us meddling Christians.
I love that guy. This guy's name is David Wood. He has a PhD in philosophy. He runs a ministry called Acts 17 Apologetics. That whole skeptometer bit was taken from his video called Scooby-doo in the Case of the Silly Skeptic. Talking about, and he's the one who actually debated Shermer and asked him these questions. A little bit of background on David Wood. He is a diagnosed sociopath. He's one of my favorite apologists. He deals a lot with Islam and critiques. And him being a sociopath is very good for him in that ministry because he gets attacked by a lot of Muslims, and it doesn't faze him at all because he doesn't care about the death threats and whatnot because part of his brain is broken. But I'd say look him up and watch some of the stuff. It's very intelligent. So, throw it over to you guys. Where are you on the skeptometer. And since the skeptometer deals with ideas, let's talk about the idea of miracles. Are you really open to them, or are you highly skeptical of them? Are you at a level that's unreasonable, or are you at a level that's open to the evidence? Ratio. Discuss and ask the questions during the question and response time. I call it response because I don't think I'll have an answer to your question. But I'll definitely respond, for sure. All right. Well, we're moving on to the next idea of jury selection. This comes from another apologist that I like. His name is J. Warner Wallace. And he, for his entire career, and I think he still is, I don't know. Is J. Warner Wallace still a cold case homicide detective?
He's like on retainer. Like
So he's there when they need him.
He's an advisor, but
Advisor, okay. Yeah, his career is cold case homicide detective. And just to give you a tiny cool little background, he came to Christ by examining the Gospels and realizing that they are eyewitness testimonies. He did a thing called forensic statement analysis in his job where he would tell suspects to write down their day. And he would use his skills, forensic statement analysis, and go through their testimony about what happened and see how they can contract time and expand time. And he could tell from that where they were leaving things out, leaving details out, or putting details in. And so he took that skill set and added and applied it to the Gospels and noticed that they were reliable eyewitnesses, which is super cool. So I also tell you to look him up. His ministry is called Cold Case Christianity. So he has a idea that he puts forth about jury selection. And as a detective, he's a prosecutor because he arrests people and goes through cold cases and builds cumulative cases against these people to show their guilt. And when they select jury members in the state of California, the prosecution and the defense analyzes people and gets rid of the fringes. So in the one category, way on the right, we have people who are prosecution, and nothing you can say is going to make them sway away. They will always vote for the prosecution. Something in their life just makes them want to vote that way. And the defense will get rid of those types of people. And we have people way over here on the left that are fours that are always pro the defense and will always vote for the defense. And so the prosecution wants to get rid of them because they're not going to be reasonable. They're not going to look at the evidence. They're just going to vote for the defense. So they're looking for 2s and 3s. And 2s and 3s have a leaning. One of them leans towards 2s lean toward the prosecution, and 3s lean toward the defense. And they're looking to try to get these people on their jury so that they can look at the evidence and be open. These people they lean certain ways, but they're open to looking at the evidence and following the truth where it leads. So he took this concept and applied it to believers and non-believers, where people who are considered ones, way on the right, are believers who are convinced of their position and no amount of evidence is going to change their mind. 4s are people who are convinced of their positions, non-believers, convinced in their position, and not going to change their mind. And then 2s and 3s are people who lean a certain way or find themselves in a certain camp, but have questions about what they believe or are open to looking at the evidence, or doubts and questions, able to look at things, being a little more open to examining, right? I would say, they hold these things because they think they're true. But I would say everybody holds ideas because they think they're true. I defy you to come up with an idea that you hold to be true that you don't think is true. Maybe that's contradictory. You want it to be true, but you know it's false, but you hold it anyway. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's something that happens. But 2s are believers who are open to looking at evidence, and 3s are non-believers who also are open to looking at evidence. So my point with bringing this up is I want you to know where you are with regard to being open to these topics. For example, miracles. Know yourself. Are you open to these types of things? Or what topics are you more skeptical about? Or what topics are you're never going to be convinced of? So know this for yourself so you can better evaluate evidence. And also, I want you to know this so that you can point this out. So that people can check their own bias and know where they stand. Just like the oracle asked Neil. Do you actually know if you're the one? She didn't say that. So, here's the question that you all knew was coming. Where are you on J. Warner Wallace's spectrum? And if you find that out, if you have enough self-awareness to put yourself in a category, do you know anybody in the 1s or 4s? And then, how would you interact with that person? Could you? Would you? Ready, take, go. So, those are some cool concepts to consider. And remember, if you got a question, go ahead and write it down and fire it at me later, which will be in a few minutes here. Because if you've been keeping track at home, that is all the things. So, our recapitulation. We talked about counseling theories, we talked about mindset, talking about how we think, if we're able to grow, if we're able to make decisions about what we think. Are we stuck? We talked about a skeptometer, about where we land on certain ideas, how we just have that ingrained in us, but are we actually being reasonable with our evidence weighing? And we talked about jury selection. So let's go back through some of our examples. With Fred, his bias was that he didn't really want there to be zombies. And so he conjured up more and more ways to explain away the evidence. For Michael Shermer, he didn't want God to exist, and so he created for himself a methodology that explained away all of that evidence. All of the evidence that would include a theistic intervening God that would do miracles, he had a way to explain it away. Often, I'll say that often you'll find that when you interact with people, it's that they've never thought about this thing. They've never considered their own bias. They've never considered what they believe They don't know if they're in a fixed mindset or not on things, or they don't know that they've made themselves a methodology that doesn't allow for any evidence to come in. They don't want to change their mind. They like what they think. They'd rather think what they think. And so if you present some evidence, they'll figure out a way to dismiss it. So this is my point here. If I say if somebody's aware of these concepts, if somebody's aware of the skeptometer or the jury selection graphic, or that it's better to have a growth mindset versus fixed mindset, or went to counseling and their counselor used cognitive behavior therapy or reality therapy, that they're in a better position to at least attempt to evaluate the evidence fairly. Or know that, okay, this is evidence that I actually have to look at, instead of going, you know what, I'm going to decide once I see this evidence, I'm going to decide it doesn't count. That's what I'm going to decide. All right, show me the evidence. Well, are you actually being reasonable? Now, our Blaise Pascal quote was, he said almost invariably, right at the beginning there, which means it's not all the time, right? So good news for you. You don't have to come to your conclusions because you like them or you're predisposed to enjoy them. You can actually come to your conclusions on the basis of proof. And so here's my little ending. I want you to understand and be aware of this, so that you can adjust your view accordingly with what the evidence shows. I would say follow the evidence where it leads, rather than going to something that says, I like this to be true, and that's what I'm going to believe. So ha and fi on you other people who disagree. Fi, I say. I don't know why you're talking like an old English person, but all right. Would you hand around the microphone? Porfa, please. It's Spanish. Please. And by hand around, I mean hold it. Or give it to Luke. Howdy.
Hey, good speech.
Thank you. I wrote it myself. Stole it from a lot of people.
Jesus had skeptics,
Okay.
and he addressed them, or the ones that we know about. It seems a number of instances where he said he called them fools, and he told them they were going to be cast into hell.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Jesus promoted a growth mindset?
Great question. Thank you. Let me repeat it for those of us in the audience. This audience, not this audience. Jesus told people that they were fools and they were going to go to hell sometimes. Do you think he promoted a growth mindset or a fixed mindset?
In particular.
The people that disagreed. Okay.
Didn't think that he was.
That didn't agree with him. I gotcha. Didn't think he was who he said he was. I would say, yeah. Well, I would say it goes back to my question to you guys about if you know anybody in the 1 or 4 category, how would you talk to them? Because obviously the people in those categories, evidence doesn't do anything. I would argue that Jesus did use evidence to show who he said he was, especially with, my favorite example is with John the Baptist, when John the Baptist was having doubts. John the Baptist was the guy who was like, hey, look everyone, the Savior who takes away the sins of the world. And then they kept living, and then John the Baptist got put in prison, and he said, hey, are you actually the Messiah or what? And Jesus does miracles in front of him, and in front of his messengers, and then says, tell him what you see. Blind are healed, the dead, I don't remember the passage, but he says, believe, look what you see. I am, so basically, yes, I am, look. by evidence that I'm showing you. So I would say he showed evidence. But how would you interact with those ones or fours? Because evidence isn't going to do anything. So one of the things that I would do is try to shake them out of their worldview. Is try to you're trying to jar them a little bit in order for them to take something seriously, in order for them to actually consider some things, because he healed somebody, and these people also explained it away by saying he can't be doing it by God's authority. It must be Satan's authority, So did Jesus, back to try to answer your question, did Jesus promote a growth mindset? I would say he showed evidences of who he was, and if people wanted to disagree, he would call them out on it, and be blunt and sometimes rude. That would be quite rude to say, "You fool, you're going to hell," or "Hey, you're a hypocrite," or something. I mean, that's jarring. And the Bible doesn't record what happened to those people, but I'd say it's jarring enough. So it goes back to the question: what do you do with the people in the ones and fours? Do you just avoid them? If they're trying to talk to you, do you just say, "You know what? I can't talk to you. You're not in a 2 or 3." That's what I'd say. Hopefully that roundabout way answered a little bit. Probably not. Thanks, Luke. You guys had such good conversations going. Congratulations. What else? Hey, we have a question from the online-osphere. Someone joining us online. Sorry, I don't look at you enough.
Okay, so the question is that you said that Michael Shermer put himself in a logical position where nothing would be valid evidence for God, and Dawkins said outright that he would not accept any evidence.
Correct.
And you said that their position was illogical. So
Unreasonable.
you responded by saying that belief in God was so illogical that it's logical to reject any evidence for God. How would you respond?
What?
So
What was the last part? If it's logical.
If they said that the belief in God was so illogical that it's logical to reject any evidence for Him, how would you respond?
So if they said that belief in God is illogical, how would I respond? Well, what I was doing is I'm pointing out that their position is unreasonable. It's one of these. Like, no amount of evidence will convince me of blank. And I think that's an unreasonable position. And that is the stance I'm taking. Because your bar is ridiculously high. And if it's that high, what we can do is we can say, it's possible that we're not even here. It's possible we're all dreaming. It's possible that Adam is dreaming and we're all part of his dream. So that's possible. Is it reasonable? So that's the position that I would say. So when they would say it's illogical that God exists, or would they change it to, or would you change it to unreasonable? Let me know. But illogical that God exists, I would disagree. Because of how reality is and how, like the fact that we have consciences and how we're not just matter interacting. So illogical, it doesn't mean God is illogical if there is a realm outside of matter. I mean, if there's anything other than matter, it's possible and therefore not illogical. That didn't go very well.
So the person online clarified
Thank you.
unreasonable would be a better word choice. Than
Okay.
illogical.
It's unreasonable to believe God exists. Thank you, person online. Wesley, it's unreasonable that God exists. Oh?
Well, you're not a 2 or 3, so.
You're not a 2 or a 3, so I'm not going to talk to you. I would need further clarification. I would say, what do you mean by that? And why is it unreasonable? What about God? The concept of God is unreasonable. We'd have to just go deeper into that because that's just a throw out thing. Because I can do that with them as well and say the concept of no God is unreasonable, and then leave. You need more than that. Luke, you are allowed a second one, especially because no one else is piping out.
Well, you were talking about why is God, I think Schumer's one of his complaints is God never heals
Amputees, yeah.
And kind of coming from that direction, God, Jesus, as depicted in the Gospels, seems to heal. He doesn't seem to heal or come across anyone with mental challenges, mentally handicapped.
Mm-hmm.
He does come across people who are demon possessed.
Yeah.
Today, we see a lot of people with mental handicaps. We don't see very many people who are demon possessed.
Sure.
Why do you think Jesus didn't come across anybody with a mental issue?
I don't know. Why didn't Jesus come across people with mental issues? We see lots of them today. He did come across lots of people with demon possession, and we don't see that today.
I just kind of.
You have an answer to that?
Well, not really, but.
Awesome.
Just kind of another question.
Oh, no.
So, like-
How are you supposed to?
Well,
I'm trying to
well,
answer
it
Luke,
kinda-
Will.
Okay, hold on. Well, it could. Do you think that it could be a parallel? Like maybe those are very similar things, but they didn't have in that time. They couldn't study the brain. They didn't know what was going on, so they just assumed, or their only explanation for it was demon possession. So
Mhm.
it could be the same thing. Mental problems today we study the brain and know what those are, but in that time, they just assumed that it was demon possession.
Yeah.
The only problem I would have with that is I feel like a few times in the Bible they specifically do say it was demon possession and the demons were cast out like plague. And so
Spoke.
Yeah, and I don't know why the Bible would have that in there if it wasn't demon possession.
And I think that's so you're talking about your contribution for those is that they may be similar and they didn't really have back then what could be known as actual mental illnesses, and so they assumed it was all demon possession. And I think that's part of what Luke is trying to get at, the parallel he wants to make, or just has thought about and come across in his circles. I'm sure. There's a few ways to answer that. The answer is I don't know, but there's a few ways I can think of. One, people with mental illnesses didn't survive very long, and so they all just weren't around as much, because if you had that, people with physical maladies didn't survive very much, and they would also just die. So there was just lots of death on that end. So that's one just way to answer that. Jesus came. Why did he come up against some demon possessions? I don't know. He was being attacked by Satan. Demons are attacking him. There'd be an answer to that. Why don't we see it a lot at all here? That's another answer as well. I would argue that in other countries where there are some stories like that that happens more often. And also I would argue that maybe, it does still happen here. We just don't encounter it. Will, you have more stuff to add?
Well, and another thing too is Jesus didn't come to just solve problems. I feel like it solved and like do miracles on everything and prove that he can do, like he, slavery was still an issue then. He didn't come to solve slavery. He didn't come to fix everybody's problems.